Let's be innovative. Let's challenge a norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The Buttkicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. From the Rhine Valley to upstate New York, the Buttkicker Sports Car Series rumbles on. At the Hockenheimring 7 days ago, a rough and tumble race ended up seeing strategy determine the winners. The temperature is only going to rise as the paddock loads in at a fast and unrelenting road course. With large differences between the two classes, there is no margin for error for anyone. Welcome to Watkins Glen. Welcome to the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix at the Glen, presented by Buttkicker. Hello everyone and welcome back to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 Buttkicker Sports Car Series. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. My name is Arjuna Kenkipati, as always joined alongside in the RaceSpotTV commentary booth by the one, the only Andrew Kinsella, and you can head to RaceSpot.tv/live timing to follow along with your favorite teams and drivers over the course of today's action. Let's dive straight into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show, because what an incredible 3 races that we've had, and finally, it's not just been consecutive wins so far, with what was a really interesting race at the Hockenheimring, seeing Graham Sanders breaking the streak of Austin Young in LMDH. However, in the GT3s, it's still very much the Sean Campbell, the Chase Wilson affair as we head into this 4th round of the championship, looking at a next level racing schedule. Andrew, Watkins Glen is fast and furious, and you can tell us all about it.
Absolutely. Watkins Glen is a different challenge than we've had so far in this season, Arjuna. We've got really fast, undulating road course here. Not a lot of low-speed corners. There are a couple, but really it's all about the speed and being able to time the traffic around this a little bit shorter track than what we've had so far this season as well. So it's going to be an interesting challenge. But looking ahead at that schedule, the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series schedule, it looks really intriguing coming up. We got a month off here, but then it's right back into the action with Circuit of the Americas, Circuit de la Sarthe in June, and then Fuji coming up in July. This is going to be a really good stretch for the Lionheart Sports Car Series here.
The Circuit of the Americas race, one that I'm sure is going to see drivers in equal measure loving and hating our trip over to the Lone Star State before we make our way over to the home of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Then we start to get a little bit more funky with things. Fuji Mosport, I think that's going to be an interesting contrast. What a long straightaway we have at Fuji on the main straight, and then Mosport has no real straightaways to speak of. And that's just in this first half of the season as we rumble our way over into 2024. Here's a look at the BMW Performance Driving School's LMDH standings, where Austin Young still leads, but Marius Valiokis, after getting second last time out, will be looking to try and get his first victory of the season, hopefully playing out the strategy right as well. Adam Blocker, John Baderford, Caleb Benty, and then last week's race winner Graham Sanders in 6th position. I look at this LMDH class, Andrew, and I realize that we're only 3 rounds in. There's no sort of form book that can really be drawn this early in the season.
Absolutely not. Even Austin Young and Marius Valiokis, even though it looks like they've got a little bit of a gap going on, they really don't. One mistake is all it takes, and the rest of the field is going to be all over the back of them. Even Graham Sanders, he was outside of the top 10 beginning of Hockenheim last week, and you can see he's all the way up to 6th, knocking on the door of the top 5 now. So this LMDH field is wide open for the taking here.
And with LMDH standings to talk about, we also have the GT3s. Now, these split into Pro and AMs. They score points based on their overall position. You're only fighting in the championship with those inside of your class. It's still 3 for 3 for Sean Campbell, as well as Chase Wilson. Ryan Otis and Josh Chin looking like they'll have a fun fight for second, but Synergy Motorsports represented well with Morhard up there in contention. Let's talk about Chase Wilson, though, because I half jokes last week that at some point we're going to have to consider when is he an AM and when does he become a pro, because he was running up there in the top 5 on occasion at the Hockenheim Ring and is already building up a points lead that sees him, I think, 6th in the combined Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, I was going to say 6th that is for Chase Wilson in the Pro Championship if he was to turn pro right now. So he is definitely showing that even though he was classified as an amateur, he's no slouch in these GT3 cars. But looking a little bit further back in that AM Championship, look at how crowded it is with James Paulson, Chris Stables, Chris Reagan, and Trevor Malone separated by only 11 points here. So there's still a lot to play for in this championship, and you never know what can happen. You never know when a bad race or misfortune befalls someone, and then suddenly all it takes is one good race, particularly in that AM Championship. We talked about it at Hockenheim, because it's all both the pros and the AMs are going for the same points here. All it takes is one really good race, and suddenly you've vaulted yourself up in that AM Championship. So it's really going to be interesting to watch here.
Of course, team championships to talk about as well very quickly. Now, this is one where there is no sort of trends that you can draw because it's been so up and down. Yes, Synergy Motorsports have built up a commanding lead at the top of the GT3 Championship. Sean Campbell by himself is scored in 2nd, and by that same token, Austin Young by himself scored in 7th in the LMDH Championship. So this HyperX Team Championship probably going to change pretty significantly over the course of the next handful of months. Here's a look at our series details, though, brought to you by Gomez Sim Industries in this debut season of the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. It is the 10th year of the Lionheart Racing Series, the first time, though, that we go multi-class with the brand new BMW M Hybrid V8 that debuted on the sim before it jumped into the real world, and also the same thing that happened with the BMW M4 GT3. We're all racing, though, with custom fixed setups built by the Majors Garage as we fight over our share of cash and prizes that tot up to $18,000, and the most significant of that prize pool is the LMDH and GT3 champions that will walk away, or rather drive away, with a BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California. Races are across the board, 90-minute time races, no real distinction there. We do have the addition of live race control, though, here in 2023. Arena track details, though, because boy, is this a fun one as we head back stateside for a couple of races to the home of the 6 Hours of the Glen, one of the 4 IMSA Michelin Endurance Series races. Now, of note, No bus stop chicane. We're running straight into that outer loop with even more speed, even more momentum as we'll run our way down in towards the boot. I said it at the start of the show as well. High-speed track, there's going to be a large difference between those LMDHs and the GT3s. Traffic management, as always, going to be important. And even though the fuel windows, 24 to 26 and then 20 to 21 laps, slightly different across the classes as per usual, we expect that they'll come in around the same time in the race. Pit lane delta, quite long given that it's a relatively short pit lane distance-wise, 30 seconds, not including pit stop time. And so as we look from up above at this track map, we don't get the sense of elevation, but Andrew, talk to us about those traffic management details that we're going to be seeing here today.
Yeah, you look at the long straightaways that we have. First of all, the long back straightaway where, again, we don't have the bus stop here, but then you look at the front straightaway, it's a little bit shorter. You look at the straightaway through the boot there. Those are really the opportunities for the LMDHs to get around those GT3 cars. If you don't get around on a straightaway, it can easily cascade into 1 or 2, even 3 seconds lost over the course of a lap, because you cannot afford to be behind a GT3 car for more than 1 or 2 corners if you're an LMDH. So traffic management and figuring out how to catch these cars and where to catch these cars is going to be so important for these LMDHs today.
Important question, Andrew. Is it the outer loop? Is it the carousel?
I use it interchangeably. I'm going to be honest here. I prefer carousel. I just think it sounds better. If there's no inner loop, how can there be an outer loop? That's my argument.
That is a fair point. Maybe with this specific layout, we can refer to it as the carousel in particular. Now, qualifying underway, and as always, we put 10 minutes on the board. Drivers get 4 attempts, and especially in this BMW M Hybrid with the battery that you've got to try and spool back up, working through your laps is always important. Now, just like it was last week, these drivers are flying through their qualifying session, so we're going to end up with plenty of time to be talking at the end. The margin at the front, though, a full quarter of a second, and then is pretty close behind. Austin Young is really getting to grips with these fixed setups and this BMW in this beginning of the championship.
Yeah, and I think it's really the one lap pace that Austin Young has been able to exhibit over some of his rivals. I don't necessarily think that he has the race pace over, particularly his teammates have shown that they've been well able to stay with him, but it's just that one lap pace has been so rapid. And Marius Valiokis, another driver with one lap pace, as he brushes the wall coming out of the final turn, and that's going to cost him what would have been a good lap.
Did he brush the wall or did he slam the wall? I'm pretty sure that was a bit more of a slam.
I was willing to be charitable for him, and then you go and ruin it here.
No charity here, that's for sure. No charity in GT3, by the way, as Miguel Vigo momentarily had jumped to the top of the timing sheet, and then Sean Campbell in the WMP Racing number 26 said, you know what, I want pole position back, and it's by a full 0.3 of a second.
Yeah, Sean Campbell just seems a little bit inevitable at the top end of the GT3 field this year, doesn't he, Arjuna? But Miguel Vigo is certainly one of the drivers to watch in terms of the drivers who are able to put the pressure to Campbell. Another one, obviously, Josh Chin did a great job last week at Hockenheim, keeping Sean Campbell honest. Ultimately came up short, but he's down in P4 right now. Ryan Otis, as we cross the line with him, he's P3. I think that was more of a throwaway lap from Otis there, if I'm being honest.
It was just him setting up for his final attempt here as he runs to the line. Now, Badefer was up to 2nd, Kraus to 5th, Sanders in front of him, and Lazier, who rejoins us today, in 6th, with LMDHs now basically all across the line, and any of those cars still running out there and just getting race preparation, or more importantly, pit stop entry preparation, something that we talked about when the Lionheart Retro Series came here. That'll be one of our talking points. We'll get to that in just a few moments' time. We did see a fun fight between Ryan Otis and Joshua Chin last time in terms of the way the strategy plays out. Now, let's talk strategy very quickly right here, because I wasn't sure what our weather conditions were going to be. I did know it was going to be toasty, Andrew, 51 degrees Celsius. I am almost 100% sure that everyone will be taking 4 tires at every pit stop in this race.
Yes, and the setup makers over at the Major Series have been a little bit sadistic with the weather this week, as you see, 51 degrees, and it's there's been a few drivers who have been complaining in the Lionheart Discord about just how much those tires have been melting over the course of the run here. So as you say, 4 tires is definitely the order of the day here.
You say complaining, you say sadistic. I say this is cool by Watkins Glen standards. When we return here in June for the 6 hours of the Glen, the third of our VCO Grand Slams, I wouldn't be shocked if we see track temperatures that are 60, if not 70 degrees Celsius. Watkins Glen and Interlagos, traditionally the 2 warmest tracks on the iRacing schedule. Ryan Otis bails, though, in qualifying. That will be his attempt done and dusted. Here's Andrew Marquez, the New York native, to the line in the Graphics LC number 63. He does have a bit of an improvement, but it's not in position. It's only in time. It's still 7th for him.
Yeah, and you'll notice, Arjuna, I did say sadistic, but I did not say unrealistic. So,
fair.
Just because they're going to be suffering doesn't mean that it's not justified with some real-world data to back it up. But yeah, Andrew Marquez has actually been doing a fairly solid job. We haven't talked about him too much in this GT3 field, but he's been having just sort of a nice solid season. But he's one of the drivers that I think as he gets used to the GT3 car, he's one for me to watch as the season progresses, just to sort of move up the grid a little bit and start competing for top 5s a little bit more often. He
is, I do think, one of those drivers I was shocked didn't go to LMDH. There was obviously a choice that all of these drivers had, whether they wanted to be LMDH GT3 when the series was announced. Joshua Chin was someone that I thought may decide to go prototype, but then I thought, you know what, makes sense that maybe he'd go GT3. That's always an interesting dilemma. Downforce or no downforce, because a lot of these drivers from the Lionheart Open Wheel Series, Andrew, like themselves some downforce.
Yes, and it's a very different technique driving a GT3 car. A lot of the NASCAR oval drivers will say, oh, well, road racing is just one discipline, but it's very much not the case. You really have to have a completely different technique with a GT3 car compared with a downforce car like the IR18 or even the LMDH car that we have here as well. So it definitely was interesting to see who went where, and again, I think it's just going to take some of these drivers a little bit longer to get used to the GT3s, but I do expect them to start gaining speed as the season goes on.
Final attempts in qualifying. Marquez, no improvement. Jaeger Lehner in that number 17 Synergy Motorsports car comes across the line to start what's going to be his final attempt in qualifying, although he's not going to get time to actually finish the lap, so that is basically qualifying in the books. Go back to the storyline of the Lionheart Retro Series race. Now, unfortunately, we did miss the end here on RaceSpotTV. However, the thing that we did not miss is the fact that Marius Valiokers grabbed his very first victory at the Lionheart Retro Series race here at Watkins Glen a couple of weeks ago, and so he's definitely someone to watch out for, starting back in 3rd, though.
Yeah, he's got his work cut out for him getting by the Geodesic Racing squad right in front of him, but I think he's really going to be up for the challenge here. 2/10 is not a lot of gap here as qualifying ends right now.
It is not, and when you get into that slipstream affair, rising up through the S's, it's one of the few places that we have seen cautions fly in Lionheart competition on road courses. In fact, it may be the only track outside of Long Beach where you may expect the caution to fly. We're ready to rumble, though, in upstate New York, one of 2 consecutive races back here stateside. Next up, we head to the Lone Star State, but let's take a look at your butt kicker starting grid. It is a Hydra Race Geodesic front row. Austin Young trying to get back up to HyperX's victory lane, has John Bader alongside, while Marius Valiokers hoping to put the no-tire call that took the race victory away from him out of his mind, alongside with the driver that ripped the victory away on his right. Phil Kraus, Flynn Lazier, 5th and 6th positions, while lining up back in 7th, Adam Blocker and Alexander Van der Sant, the 2 Powerslide Motorsports machines. Team Race First has Caleb Benzie alongside with David Sewer in that Synergy Lavoie Motorsports car, while Matt Taylor and Brian Beard for Graphics LC, 11th and 12th positions. Over in 13th, we find Tyler Graf, hoping not to be unlucky 13, but he's got the cursed Chris Fowler alongside, Guyon, O'Brien, and Razmas through your 17 LMDHs. Razmas the only one with no time on the board. Over to the GT3s, where it's status quo at the front. Sean Campbell, another pole position, 142.413, almost 3/10 clear of Miguel Vigo, who's going to be hoping to stay in drafting range and maybe play some fuel mileage gains. Ryan Otis has been strong in the Synergy Motorsports car, but so is Joshua Chin. They're tussling for second in the championship, but look at that margin, 4/10 between the drivers on that second row. Matthew Morhard backing up his Synergy Motorsports teammate Carlos Villa on the outside of row number 3. Inside of row 4, it's Andrew Marquez. He's got Chase Wilson, the best of the AMs, the championship leading an AM, but also a driver with some pressure directly behind. Eric Staropoli in 9th as Chris Staples, second in AM. On the outside of the top 10, Chris Reagan, Trevor Malone, 11th and 12th positions as the AMs start to work their way forward in qualifying. James Paulson, Drew White, Travis Yegolena, Creighton Carter, Gabe Wood, and then Dean Moll. That's through your top 18, while lining up behind them, Jim Herrick, Craig Forsyth, Clint Martin, Christopher Hill, and Logan Spath, with a couple of the drivers at the back with their times on the board getting dinged for being slightly naughty in our previous rounds of the championship. With our look through our butt kicker starting grid though, and the field rolling on their formation lap, it's time to run you down through today's featured onboard cameras, and we start on board with Joshua Chin, who rides with the BMW Performance Driving School. Drive on the edge of physics and experience the ultimate rush. Visit bmwperformancecenter.com. Brian Beard carries with him Butt Kicker. Sim racing is better with Butt Kicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. Our AM Championship leader Chase Wilson rides with HyperX. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. And then on the outside of the front row, at the very front of the field, is John Badefer, who rides with Gomez Sim Industries, makers of high-end esports equipment and controls. Visit gomezsimindustries.com. Andrew, I feel a little bit tense right now, just with that weight of expectation of knowing the caution on the opening couple of laps is a real possibility. But once we get through that, we've still got to go through the first cycle of traffic.
Yeah, I don't think that there's really going to be a lot of breathing room for any of these drivers here today. We were talking about this before we came on air, and there are 2 real danger zones on this opening lap. The S's coming up turns 2, 3, 4, and then right where you're looking at right now, entering this boot section here, this is a danger zone, and it carries all the way through, basically onto all the way to the heel of the boot. It's very easy to lose the car, particularly coming out of this corner here, coming out of the toe. You can get back to the throttle too quickly, too heavily, and just spin out. And then when you do, you're basically unsighted for the cars behind you. So it's not just the first lap that can cause carnage, it's the second and the third. And then, as you say, it's all of these LMDHs trying to successfully negotiate the GT3 field as well. So it's going to be a very interesting race to watch. I think there's going to be a lot of action, and there's going to be some carnage too.
I think the one thing that I'm looking forward to is the fact that everyone is going to be screaming for tires every time they dive on towards pit lane. It doesn't leave much room to play around with how you fight on track and then not leave room for some sort of strategy games on pit lane. Prediction though at the front of the field, Andrew, who comes out on top in LMDH?
I'm going to go with John Badefer. I think it's his turn to lead us home.
GD3?
Sean Campbell, you can't really bet against him at this point, can you?
I agree. I'll go with Campbell. I'll go with Valiokas, though. I feel like the race clutch car, even though it's still missing that livery, today is the time he comes good. It's Watkins Glen where he'll grab his first Butt Kicker Sports Car Series victory. Pace car off and away though, hopefully for the first and only time today. Field left in control of the Hydra Race geodesic racing machines. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart. We're racing for the Butt Kicker BMW Performance Center Grand Prix at the Glen, presented by Butt Kicker, down in towards turn number 1 with a split start. The LMDHs will run their way down through the 90, and already Marius Valiokas trying to slip up the inside of that Hydra Race geodesic machine of John Badefer. Meanwhile as well, now the GT3 starting to work their way through and see this 2x2 formation down and working their way up towards the S's. LMDH is in towards the outer loop, and fortunately, Andrew, a tidy start through the field.
Yeah, it's been a surprisingly tidy start so far. There was one car that got a little bit wide, but other than that, it was all clear in the GT3 field as well as the LMDH field. And look at Phil Kraus, the start that he had. He started 6th, but he's all the way up to, I believe, 5th now, but he's knocking on the door of that top 4.
Chris Fowler is indeed cursed. He's already back down on pit lane, the only victim in the early stages of this race. GT3s now past the bus stop and the lack of bus stop, through the outer loop and then down in towards the boot section for the first time. Look at Blocker trying to make a move on Phil Kraus and the LMDHs as they wind their way back towards the final sector of the lap. Remember, 90-minute timed race. We have seen on previous occasions drivers being a little bit wrong with their fuel calculations, and with warm track conditions, if anything, that makes it a little bit easier. You use a little less fuel because you're struggling to get on power. End of the first lap, 1.3 seconds the margin at the front for Austin Young, who we've seen in the past, if you allow him to break away, will not be reeled back in.
Yes, this was exactly what Austin Young was hoping for. He's found a way with Valiokis, Saunders, and Betafur fighting on that first lap. He's found a way to break free, and I think he's pretty much clear at this point from the draft of Valiokis. And Betafur just had a terrible first lap starting in that second position. He's all the way down to fourth, so he got swarmed on that initial start there.
He made a bit of a mistake through the carousel, as I should remember to call it now. We check back in with your GT3s as they begin that about 100-foot climb up through the S's. You've got Sean Campbell still leading, but this is what draft does. It allows the field to stay close, and they're all pretty fast corners, even in the slow corners. It sounds counterintuitive, but what that means, Andrew, is that draft plays a factor everywhere you go, because you're never really getting that slow that the draft is not helping you suck forward using that hole in the air.
Yes, it does, but what it also means is that aero wash does come into play here on many of these corners. Particularly, you mentioned the tires going off. That's going to be a factor the longer that we run, is that if you're following behind some of these drivers, you're going to be at a disadvantage by the end of this fuel run in more corners than you otherwise would be on many of these other circuits that we've been to.
I think Sean Campbell made a small mistake there, and it did get a little bit closer, but I don't think really opening the door for any sense to be made. There's going to take a couple more laps before the traffic plays out now. I'm not going to talk too much about track limits, because then we'll wake Paul Smith out of his sleep over in the UK, because that conversation on RaceSpotTV always gets his attention. But they are liberal here at Watkins Glen. Here's what happened into the carousel, and Chris Fowler slightly spooked on cold tires.
Yeah, that was just an unforced error there from Chris Fowler. He got in too deep, and I just think that he mistimed the run that he had on the car in front of him. Didn't realize that he needed to get on the brakes as hard as he had to on that first lap on cold tires, and it was just a misjudgment.
I feel like we're in the calm before the storm right now. It is starting to stretch out a little bit as the GT3 cars finish their second lap of racing, but it's always that first pass through of traffic, because everyone is so compressed. That is the most dangerous. It also allows the breakaways to happen the most. Month of May, it feels like we're more at Indianapolis every time we come down this back straightaway than in upstate New York with how much they're snaking back and forth.
Yeah, and I do see that that's more going on in the GT3 field at this point, because the GT3s are so compacted together right now. They have not strung out at all. The LMDHs have gotten a little bit more strung out, but like, look at that through the toe of the boot there. It's just car after car after car, and you can see the LMDHs already working down that back straightaway. The LMDHs are about 15 seconds a lap quicker than the GT3s around here, and it's a minute 27 laps for the LMDHs, minute 42 for the GT3s, so they're quickly going to be caught up by these LMDHs, beginning with Austin Young.
It's the way they make the speed as well that is so different. They've got these prototypes don't have as much downforce as previous generation top-class prototypes may have done. The addition of the hybrid means they will spool out of the corners a little bit better, but they suck to the ground just so much better. A lot of the downforce for these cars not actually configurable via setup. You're locked in, which is why the rear wingless Peugeot is a thing, because you're limited on where you can configure your aero, but they are still interesting cars. It does mean that we talk about these LMDHs, these LMHs, hypercars, whatever you want to call them, being 3 minute 30 seconds around Circuit de la Sarthe. That's the target lap time there, Andrew, which used to be what LMP2 cars always did.
Yeah, so they're not as fast as, say, those absolutely amazing diesel hybrids that we had at one point that would go almost unheard of speeds around Circuit de la Sarthe. That was the prime time to watch Le Mans racing, if you ask me, but and prototype style racing. But these new LMDH hybrid or hypercar, I think it just creates a little bit closer racing, and faster isn't always better when it comes to the quality of the racing. So I like the direction that WEC and SAR are going.
We'll see how it all plays out. The idea of LMGT3 does make me want to vomit a little bit in my own mouth, but those are apparently optional, so we'll see how it gets played out. Already into the midst of lap traffic, though, we can see that as Logan Splath and Clinton Martin battle 37th and 38th in the overall combined field, Austin Young is directly on the back of them. And the give or take of traffic is what defines these multi-class races. How aggressive you can be, how tentative you've got to be. Initially, it looked like Young was going to lose out a lot, but then, as Valiokas takes them 3 wide, he's already lost about half a second more to the race leader.
I was going to say tentative isn't exactly the word that I would use to describe Marius Valiokas's approach to traffic so far this year, Arjuna.
Oh! That's Austin Young! That's your race leader! The championship leader up through the 90, involved in a huge one, and we predicted there may be some drama, and somehow Austin Young, who has done such a good job so far this season of being committed but calculated through traffic, comes unstuck.
Oh my, that was a big incident for Austin Young, and it was just he got a little bit crossed up with some GT3 traffic on the exit of 1. I don't think that he realized that the closing rate would be quite as fast as it was with the 71 car. That was Creighton Carter that he got collected with, and it's caused some serious damage to that car of Austin Young.
And now Gabe Wood and David Sirwa seem to have been tangled up, and there's a LMDH car that lands on its rear wheels rather uncomfortably. That's Sirwa in the 99. Now, is everything just about traffic mismanagement, or is there maybe some aggressive drivers trying to make advantage through this traffic? It is pretty relentless for them right now. Here's a look at Austin Young, though, who, just makes a self-inflicted mistake trying to get to the inside, and fortunately will get away with minimal damage to his car. It's the time loss that's significant, as Carter, quite rightly, takes a while to get pointed back in the right direction.
You say minimal damage, but he has serious suspension damage on his right front corner right now. You can potentially see it in one of these pictures, but it is not pointing at all in the correct direction.
And in the live pictures, Marius Valiokas up through the S's has just checked off one of the Hydro-Ice Jessic racing machines, and now we got a track blocker. This is ridiculous. I am absolutely sorry, but for the caliber of driver that we have, we should not be seeing ridiculous stuff like this. They can't even figure it out as they're coming up through the S's. There's a GT3 Staropoli off into the wall.
We did say that there would be some carnage going on when the LMDHs finally caught up to the GT3s, and that has certainly happened here. It looked like it all kicked off with Valiokas, and I believe that was Sanders, and then Blocker just had nowhere to go, and he had just had a hellacious impact. That is going to end the 74's day for sure.
Let's start with what happened with Gabe Wood and David Sirwa very quickly. Let's not miss this out. It's Wood that slides the rear end by himself, and then Sirwa, I think, is going to get collected. Not much that he could really do. I think Brian Beard involved in that one as well. Sirwa takes a pretty almighty tumble. It was Carlos Villa, the Hydro-Race geodesic racing machine, that Valiokas absolutely speared there. Now, I'm not sure why that wasn't a yellow flag, especially once this happened.
Yeah, you can see the impact of Blocker there. He just had absolutely nowhere to go. And so that is both Valiokas and Blocker. Certainly the day's done for them at this point as well.
Right on board with Sanders, for a second here, and you just see it's a hole that's never really there. I mean, you tell the GT3 drivers to hold their racing line. I'm not sure what you want them to do in that situation.
Yeah, there was just no need for that move at this point in the race. With an hour and 20 minutes left on the clock, there was just no need for Valiokis. And we talked about how he's always had this very aggressive approach to traffic, and that's what can happen, is it just came back to bite him there.
So quick look on board with Staropoli, who, I mean, blindsided, and you can tell his steering is toast at this point. There's not much he can really do. Significant play there, and so it does end with him often in the wall. Now, as we'll rejoin live pictures, Flynn Lazier, Mike Rasmussen, and Graham Sanders all down on pit lane. So is Austin Young, Marius Valiokis, Adam Blocker, Brian Beard, Carlos Villa. Chase Wilson, AM Championship leader, got tangled up in that. Didn't really pick that one out. Christopher Hill, Staropoli, Sirwa, Carter, Wood, Mole, Fowler. 40 cars down to 24 left on track right now.
Oh my word, that was quite the I don't think that we predicted an exciting first time through the field. I don't think we were quite predicting as much carnage as what we just saw. But we do have two drivers that are very fast that are still out on track, and that's John Betafor leading Phil Kraus right now. And Kraus is putting the pressure on that 67 of Betafor. We talked about drivers who have had to try to get used to these cars. I think Kraus definitely falls in that category, but we saw what he can do when he's got the mastery of the car with the IR18 last season. I think he's starting to really get a handle on these LMDHs, so he's definitely looking to put the pressure on John Betafor here today.
And right now, I think there are 8 running LMDH cars out of the 17 that took the green flag. They're all being passed. All the other ones, excuse me, are now being passed. Sean Campbell in GT3 lead overall is in 9th position, and we might have actually some fun to talk about in this GT3 class. So I'm going to try and look on the positives, even though I think you can tell, not too thrilled what we've seen so far. Sean Campbell, Miguel Vigo, Ryan Otis, and hopefully Josh Chin can make up for that at the front. And meanwhile, in the AM class, we might have some fun with Chris Staples trying to hold on for a first AM championship win.
Absolutely. Staples has been doing a good job. He didn't have the best time out at Hockenheim last week, but he's one of the drivers that I was looking to maybe step up and try to take it to Chase Wilson. And we talked about this before, Arjuna. All it takes is one bad incident and suddenly the championship gets turned on its head. Look at Staples right here. If he can hold it together for the rest of this race, he's looking at a 6th place point haul for that AM championship. It's going to be huge.
It is. It's swings and roundabouts. I was trying to say that it's so early in the season that you can't really take too much away from it. And so maybe that's slightly a commentator's curse. I don't know if I can be blamed for that one. You can see on the left side plus and minuses. Plus 10 for O'Brien in the LMDH. He's the biggest mover there. In the GT3, Logan Spath, after his qualifying suspension from this round, he's up 9 positions into 14th in class. 14th overall, not sure where that places him in class. But we're only 15 minutes into this one, and we've probably got another 15 or so minutes before we head into the pit stop window. I am curious how many drivers are going to try and head back out there, Andrew, given that so many cars are on pit lane.
I was going to say, I think if you can repair your car, then you definitely should. And it looks like Graham Sanders and Mike Rasmussen certainly might be a couple of drivers who are looking to get back out there. There are some drivers who just quite clearly will not be able to get back on there. Adam Blocker obviously is not going to be able to get back out on the track. I don't think Valiokis is either. As we go to a little bit of split screen action here, you can see on the top screen the full battle, but riding on board with Miguel Vigo, with Ryan Otis, looking at Miguel Vigo and Sean Campbell on the bottom screen. This is the best battle that we have on the track right now, Arjuna. So
Sean Campbell's in our YouTube chat, by the way, which tells you how much attention he's apparently paying to the road. He is making a fair point, which is that the Valiokis was making it clear that he was going to send it to the inside. And I will put the counterpoint to what I said earlier, in that GT3 drivers are told to hold their racing line, and that Carlos Villa is also experienced with traffic management and is someone that I would expect that if he sees someone going for a move down the inside would probably have let them go, which is telling me that Carlos Villa didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I think the closing speed was just a little bit too fast for Via. I think Via was expecting to let him by coming out of the S's, and Valiokis was expecting Via to let him by going into the S's, and it just resulted in some miscommunication there. I don't think that there was ill intent on either part, but I do think that Valiokis' general aggression when it comes to overtaking these GT3 cars can result in situations like we saw.
At the end of the day, it is just this track as well. I think I circled this one as maybe the most treacherous in the first half of the season for the traffic management. I actually think this is more dangerous than the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. I think that might be a bold claim, but
that sounds like famous last words to me, Arjuna.
Traditionally at Mosport, things go well. I'm knocking on wood. But maybe it's just the fact that there's just so much more jeopardy, in my opinion, at Mosport when you make a mistake. Because here at Watkins Glen, I don't want to say you can get away with it, but there's a little bit more leeway in certain corners. Think about the runoff that we have. At Mosport, especially the version that we have in iRacing, there is no runoff.
There's no runoff, and it is a narrower track, so it just naturally inclines you to maybe taking a little bit less risk. Here, the track is newer, it's smoother, and it's wider. And it does, the longer straightaways and the longer opportunities does sort of invite you to be a little bit more aggressive. So I will agree with you there. I just think that we are going to see a lot of carnage at Mosport.
You're the Canadian. You're meant to be optimistic about us heading over to Canada. Here is your race lead as they dice through traffic once again. Badefer and Kraus split by just 3/10, and you'll see as they jink up towards the inside, up through that left-hand hairpin, that there's a GT3 that gets spooked and might open the door for some potential passing opportunities. That's Forsyth, White, and Spath for 12th, 13th, and 14th overall, not in the AM classifications. If I'm anyone in a draft right now, I'm pretty happy not pushing the issue right now. Oh,
that's a car on the exit of 11 there.
That was Drew White. That is going to be backing his way up in the very distinctive number 55.
And Drew was very lucky to not get T-boned there because he lost it in probably one of the worst spots in terms of being able to actually avoid the car, because that car that corner is very blind as you're coming through it. So he got very lucky that he didn't get T-boned.
Got Sean Campbell and Miguel Vigo going side by side. This through the boot section, not traditionally where you see cars battling it. Sean Campbell is still messaging us, by the way, in our YouTube chat, telling us that, he's done the Le Mans Virtual Series and he's learned that you can't just take the line, which is very much what Moritz Lohner, who went from the virtual world to the real world competing in the DTM Trophy, said that he learned in his very first race weekend at Monza when he tried to go on the outside of the first chicane and found out that real race car drivers will just push you off into the gravel.
Yes. Yeah, there's in some ways there's more respect, and in some ways there's less respect when it comes to real world racing versus the sim racing. But yeah, it's easy to say from the commentator's perspective that, he should have done this, or the GT3 should have done that, or Valiokis was too aggressive. But at the end of the day, what it is two drivers basically having to communicate on the track solely through their car postures and positioning. And sometimes the wires just get crossed, and that's what you saw happen, in my opinion, between those two.
No, I think that's fair. And I'm sure they'll go back and forth on blame. Racing drivers always have an interest. We'll always try and give a reason before they will come to an understanding. That's what happened to Flynn Lazier. Very broken BMW M Hybrid V8 and all by himself as well. Drew White, what happened here? Because final corner is not a normal... He got loose on entry, didn't he?
Yeah, he was loose under braking and never really gathered it, and then he hit the curb on the inside, and as soon as he hit that curb, he was very much on a one-way ticket to that outside wall there. But yeah, you can see he was just always loose throughout that entire corner there.
And Logan Spath did get a little bit of contact, and I think Jim Herrick did a good job to avoid all of that. 70-ish minutes left, about 10 minutes before we will enter the pit stop window. And again, going back to what I said earlier, with me talking about fuel windows and the fact that we are probably putting on tires in every pit stop, there actually probably isn't much that you can do, Andrew, in terms of shortening a pit stop time because you're going to be limited by the time it's going to take to put on the tires, I would assume. But what would you be thinking if you are Vigo, Otis, Chin, who have just been tucked in the draft and saving behind Campbell?
Honestly, you probably... I don't know that you actually want to go any longer. You might want to try and short pit here. But the big thing for all of these drivers, particularly Vigo, who's so close to the back of Sean Campbell right now, is positioning in the pit box is everything. We know in iRacing that positioning does actually affect how long your car is stationary for. So you have to be very, very precise every single time down pit lane on this track, where you just don't have the margin for error and the margin for strategy that you might at, say, a Hockenheimring.
I think that was Caleb Bensi that dived his way on past. The race leader splitting them up there. I'm not going to say which GT3 driver and team have just sent me a message, but I will say that one has sent me a message saying that maybe not 4 tires in every stop. There is the wonder if there is going to be a gamble on 3 or maybe 2 tires in one stop, which I would assume, just logically thinking here, Andrew, with us racing past 1:30 p.m. virtual standard time, would be the final pit stop of the race.
You would think, and you would think that in order to pull that strategy off, you would have to go as long as possible on both of your first 2 stints, and then use a very short second stint to potentially have that 2 or 3 tire stop. But I don't know if I like that strategy. I think given what we've seen and given how much carnage we've had so far, give me the 4 tires right now.
I agree. I do wonder, especially after Sean Campbell almost ran out of tire last week. We saw the gap to the chasing pack behind really close frighteningly in the final couple of laps, to the point where if it was one or two laps longer, Sean Campbell may not have won the race. He is definitely one driver that was probably going to take 4 tires. The problem about talking about Sean Campbell is that he's listening to everything that we're saying while he's also driving. And
he's been doing a good job of driving and typing in the YouTube chat, so apparently the pressure that Vigo is putting him under isn't too bad right now.
No, apparently not. So apparently we need to get on the blower to the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing team and tell Miguel to turn up the wick just a little bit.
Just a couple of friendly bumps, as long as it's on the straightaway, it's all good.
At least these cars, they have rear diffusers, but they're not as chunky as and important like the Porsche RSR rear diffuser is, so you can get away with that. While Chris Staples continues to have a good run in 6, by the way, going to take some very important AM Championship points. Let's also give a shout out to Matthew Morhart, because Synergy Motorsports in the Team Championship aren't just up there and running away because of Ryan Otis's strong performances. It's because Matthew Morhart's up there in the top 5 and backing up the 95 with consistent performances as well.
Absolutely. Morhart has been just quietly consistent every single race. He's been there or thereabouts on pace. Not maybe quite as fast as the top 4, Campbell, Vigo, Otis, and Chin, but he's definitely the next best of the rest category, and he's just been so consistent in bringing the car home, and that's really, really important in a long championship like we have here.
I'm trying to think of who the other drivers, by the way, that do enjoy a good chat in the YouTube while driving. Our good friend Robert Malechka's known to do that, but that's more on the ovals.
And during caution flags in particular.
Yes. I did see Jacob Oster, one of our Team i5G drivers from that Lionheart Open Wheel Series, trying to type messages with his gloves on. They
did not work very well.
No, it was not very readable. That was the very, very funny thing. So, mixed messages. Check in, by the way, with Van der Sant Taylor. This is 4th and 5th positions. 2 drivers that, being totally honest, have not really taken to the car, maybe, is what it is. Maybe it's taken to the traffic management. Van der Sant had a decent run out in the first round of the season, but both of these drivers, who are pretty stalwart contenders on road courses and other cars in Lionheart competition, have struggled to crack the top 10.
Yes, they have it. And the other thing to note is that there is already in this short beginning to the short sports car championship, there is some history between Taylor and Van de Sant. There was a little bit of a coming together, you might say, at the Hockenheim ring last time out. And then if that sort of thing does happen again here today, there is another car right behind them in Michael O'Brien, who is very much looking to capitalize on any sort of argy-bargy that might happen here.
Honestly, I had forgotten about that contact last week, but that was an attempted American football play by Matt Taylor on Alexander Van der Sant, trying to use a GT3 car as a pick, which is a known and acceptable strategy. We talk about it a lot in racing. You do have to do it safely, though, unfortunately, and that did go a little bit beyond the line. As we check back in, you mentioned earlier, by the way, that when you have draft, you also have dirty air, especially important through some of these more medium to higher speed corners. Again, Vigo pops himself to the outside, just trying to relieve himself of that dirty air on turn in. One thing that I found interesting listening to drivers in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup this past weekend was that if you're within a half a second, Andrew, they feel like that's good. Then you're getting the most out of the suck, as the kids would call it. When you're half a second plus, that's when the dirty air outweighs the effect of the slipstream. And so that's why you're seeing all three of these drivers really closing up as side by side for the race lead. Kraus and Baedefer head off to traffic.
Yeah, really nice move here from Kraus. Baedefer trying to get whatever draft he can from the GT3 car. It wasn't very much, but Kraus has the preferred inside line. Oh, they nearly come together through the carousel.
There was a moment there where I think Baedefer opened up the steering. Flashbacks to our open wheel series race here at Watkins Glen last year when it was Van der Sant and Kraus that were going wheel to wheel into the final laps of the race, and it was a slight wobble that saw Kraus end up lose out as Van der Sant grabbed what was his first Lionheart Open Wheel Series victory. Thoughts on that one? I mean, we'll have to go back and look at the entire sequence, but a bit scary there.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like one of those no harm, no foul type of scenarios where, I mean, if I was Baedefer, I probably would be cursing Kraus under my breath a little bit, but at the same time, it's just one of those situations where I think Baedefer was probably coming down while Kraus was coming up a little bit. This is the move into the 90 here. Kraus sticks his nose on the inside. They sandwich the GT3 car coming up through the S's, and that's what allowed Kraus the inside line here. It was a really bold move from Kraus, and he had to make that outside stick through there, and then this longer right-hand corner, that's what allowed them to go there. I think that slight contact you might have seen there coming up through the exit of the S's, that's what precipitated this little hip check that nearly occurred there.
So there was definitely contact before as well, without a shadow of a doubt, and I think you're right in saying that a little bit of afters played as we head into the pit stop window with about 30 minutes complete. Benzie up on the Jackson as expected. We're thinking 4 tires across the board. Taylor did a 23.4 second stop. Michael O'Brien, unfortunately, has headed off to pit lane and has been in for quite a while, so I'm not sure if we maybe missed something there. I think we're not far away from maybe seeing some GT3s in, although they could potentially go a lap or two longer, which would not be bad in terms of that tire strategy you were talking about earlier.
And one thing we need to cover, we talked about this in the Retro Series, but the entrance to pit lane and particularly getting yourself woed down to pit lane speed at Watkins Glen, it's a very tricky proposition, Arjuna. I believe the pit speed here is 40 miles an hour, which is just a crawl for these drivers, considering how fast they go around this track for most of the lap. And you really have to get on the binders coming out of that final corner. So I think maybe O'Brien might have just overcooked it on the pit entry.
So that's Baedefer, who bails early, a lap earlier than Kraus, who will try and extend. So wait for Guyon as well. He's the only other non-stopper. We'll check in with what happened with Michael O'Brien, but I don't think it was necessarily pit lane related. That's Clint Martin in the Skowers car that runs himself a bit wide.
Oh!
And poor Michael O'Brien gets a boot full of a BMW.
Yeah, I sold Michael O'Brien short. That was certainly not his fault. That was 100% the GT3 car. He just got a little bit spooked with Van de Sant, and then O'Brien just absolutely nowhere to go. And some good avoiding action from the GT3 car to come to a complete stop there probably saved him some damage.
It was Chase Wilson, who was already a couple of laps down, so it didn't really cost him anything, which is why I think he was so willing. Of note, Josh Chin, who has struggled to stay within a second or so of the back of Ryan Otis, is now being able to bring himself a couple of tenths closer, and with Sean Campbell really getting that rear end out in that second and third sectors of this lap. You can see how much closer Miguel Vigo is. Working lap 18, we had a predicted fuel window of 18 to 19 laps, not including the full pace lap that we had to do. Josh Chin, who is a prodigious fuel saver, comes on in. Top 3 stay out.
Yeah, and I like this call from Chin. I think what it does is there's no way that he was going to overcome all of the dirty air of the leading 3 in front of him. So what this does is it'll allow him to get some clean air, get some solid laps in, and potentially leapfrog maybe even all 3 of them if they can time this properly. But they're well within the window because obviously we are having 2 stops again here today. So this more evenly cuts up the race into thirds for Josh Chin, and I think that the fresh tires will definitely make a difference.
So Josh Chin drops and rolls after 19.4 seconds. Matthew Morehart's already been there stationary for about 3 seconds longer. We're almost 3 wide, by the way, for your race lead as they fan themselves out down the hill into the boot. Sean Campbell, in my opinion, for the first time this season, is slowing down the cars behind.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. Definitely Vigo and certainly Otis, I think, has more speed in this car right now. The trick is whether they're just sort of content to ride here and fuel save, or whether this is just simply like they can't find a way past Campbell even with the draft. So it's interesting to watch at this stage. You don't really know what's strategy and what is just ultimate pace.
I do get the sense, though, as Phil Krause heads off to pit lane, that we will also see Campbell, Vigo, and Otis all dive on in. Campbell looks like he's staying out 1 lap longer. That's why he was backing them up so much. Vigo and Otis peel off in synchrony. Sean Campbell thinking of just trying to eliminate as much time in pit lane as possible as he'll go onto lap 20 in the run.
And I think Campbell's very content to go that 1 extra lap here. It's going to just come back and pay him off in the final stint. And really, the GT3 car does take a little bit of time to get the tires back up to temperature. But you can see down in the bottom half of your screen, this is the battle that we got to keep track of. Where does Josh Chin come out? He's having to negotiate a little bit of traffic here, and that's going to slow him down. Not what Chin was hoping for. I think that Vigo and Otis, but Vigo has a little bit of a longer stop compared to Otis. But certainly I think Otis is going to be able to make it out in front of Josh Chin.
So this is what we saw last time as well, is the fact that you can slightly change how you play the race out in terms of how much fuel you put in each phase of the race. And so Josh Chin and Ryan Otis went slightly different last time by. This time Josh Chin is going to go slightly shorter than everyone else in the first stint, will go longer than everyone else in the end. Difference of almost 6 full seconds between Chin and Vigo in terms of stop time, and now they're all broken up and out of draft, Andrew.
And I will say that the only driver that did not have the undercut work was Phil Krause and John Betafor. Every other battle that we were tracking before this pit cycle, whether it was Matt Taylor and Van de Sant, whether it was Chin getting ahead of Otis and Vigo, the undercut has been the more powerful move here, with the exception of Phil Krause.
Well, in the case of Phil Krause, he actually stopped for about 1.5 seconds shorter than John Betafor, I think in part to try and make sure that he gained the track position. He also went longer, let's not forget, by 2 laps, so he's not really cost himself too much, whereas Josh Chin, by pinning early and filling less, will have more fuel by just pure physics to put in at the end. Here's Sean Campbell, though. Question will be, how long does he want to stay in the pit lane after 20 full laps out on track?
I think certainly Campbell is going to take the 4 full tires and fuel at this stage of the race. The question for me is, will Chin be able to leapfrog Campbell as well, or did Campbell do just enough on that final lap to stay clear of that number 73
No,
car.
not going to even be close, because I think Josh Chin, yeah, there he is, already well away. So we're more concerned, I think, about where Sean Campbell and Miguel Vigo in that Hydra Race geodesic racing car that's probably working through turn number 1 right about now comes out. There's Vigo running wide. He'll have more momentum up the hill as well, and so he'll be right back into drafting range. I mean, yes, Campbell went a lap longer than Vigo, but it's basically status quo, you'd have to think.
To a certain extent, but we're also forgetting that number 95 car of Ryan Otis in second position. He's well clear of Sean Campbell. In fact, he's clear of the drafting range as well. So that's 2 positions that Sean Campbell's lost. This is the first time that Campbell's really been challenged in the GT3 field this year. And well, there's really not 2 better drivers or 2 worse drivers to have in front of him. With Chin and Otis, because they're both so consistent, Arjuna.
Let's think about it this way, though. We've got 3 real races going on right now. Josh Chin's on his own strategy. Ryan Otis is in the middle, and then Sean Campbell, Miguel Vigo are basically...
Otis is the same as Vigo.
No. Ryan Otis pitted for 21.4 seconds. He was a good 4 seconds shorter than Campbell or Vigo.
So you're thinking 3 tires for him.
No, I'm not even sure if this is tires or if this is just fuel, to be totally honest, because 19.4 seconds and then 21.4, to me, that is probably the same number of tires. 25.9 seconds, I think you're right, would be 4. I'll have to go see if Josh Chin, because maybe Jason Brophy can let us in on the strategy, did take 2 or 3 tires. It was 3 tires for Joshua Chin. Jason Brophy's already let me know.
Okay, very interesting. So 3 tires for Chin. I'm guessing 3 tires for Otis as well.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the long run, whether or not Chin and Otis can really keep up the pace. Because if they can keep up the pace, probably they may have to take 4 tires on that final stop, but at the same time, this gap that they've got, it could just be enough, because Chin's got 5 seconds on Sean Campbell right now. That's a non-insignificant amount of time.
It is, but I wonder how the 3 tires are going to bear out, especially since we were talking about the fact that you might benefit more from waiting till the final stint to do that, when the track temperatures are potentially going to have dropped off just a little bit. I'll have to wait and see on that one. No real battles going on right now in LMDH. Phil Krause 1.5 seconds clear of Betafer, and then Benzi a further 8 seconds back. A battle for the podium sees Matt Taylor and Alexander Van der Sande in that order, trying to chase down that Team Race First car at the very front of the field. Again, we'll go and say hello to our AM race leader, because Chris Staples 6th in the combined classification. And when you score points based on overall position, but you are only fighting in the championship with drivers in your same class, sometimes there's this misconception, Andrew, that you don't want to fight if you're an AM when you see a pro car. That is very much not the case if you're Chris Staples here, especially given that Chase Wilson, who is back out on track, is trying to regain some championship points here today.
Absolutely. This is go time for Chris Staples. This is his opportunity to really put a dent into Wilson's lead, and you can't be worried about whether or not the car behind you is in your championship. This is all about points for Chris Staples, and he's in the driver's seat right now, but he cannot succumb to the pressure that he's feeling right now.
Still a long way to go. Here's Taylor and Van der Sande, by the way. Last time we checked in with them, it was Van der Sande up in front of Taylor. We've got some traffic to deal with again. See how they can play themselves out. Already seen one little bit of drama with traffic today up through the S's. Hopefully Taylor and Van der Sande not looking to try and get involved in consecutive back-to-back races. Now, I did mention during our Gomez Sim Industry Series details that we've got live race control. The problem is when so many of the cars involved in the incidents have retired, there's not much you can really do to penalize anyone. And so I think race control has been relatively quiet today, but Matt Taylor almost gave them a reason to be busy.
Ooh, that was a little bit of an optimistic move there from Taylor, but you can really tell that Van der Sande is putting Taylor under a lot of pressure, and that was a little bit of a desperate move there. I don't think the GT3 car really thought that he was going to make that move, but you can see Taylor covering off the inside line from Van der Sande. Van der Sande looking to the outside, coming down the long back straightaway into the carousel. Will he be able to hold it on the outside? Look at him throw it into that corner. Really strong move there from Van de Sant. He takes back that position from Matt Taylor that Matt Taylor gave up to Alexander Van de Sant that Van de Sant gave up to Taylor in that pit cycle.
And this is probably a track where Van de Sant might be able to feel a little bit more comfortable with the car, because we saw him be so comfortable last year in the Dallara IR18. Very interesting to see if we get the chance to talk to him maybe post-race, how he feels about the speed here today. One thing that we did learn last time we were here in that Dallara IR18 in the Lionheart Open Wheel Series, though, was the fact that Alexander Van de Sant has mastered the art of getting the car away from the lane. And that's an important thing, Andrew, because a lot of people will think that you don't make up a lot of time there. The difference between Phil Krause and Van de Sant initially was on pit lane, something that Van de Sant then converted on track later.
Yeah, and that's the intriguing part about racing like this, is it's all about little battles that somehow add up to the full picture of the race, and you don't always realize what's important, what's not. Meanwhile, we've got Matt Taylor that we're watching here. He's looking to get right back on Van de Sant. Van de Sant, interestingly, he wasn't covering at the beginning of the straightaway, is covering off the inside now. So again, it's a little battle here, and as they battle, they're just getting a little bit further away from Bensi. So how much do Taylor and Van de Sant want to battle right now, and how much do they want to really set sail and try to get after that 29 car?
Van de Sant getting a bit spooked there, working past Andrew Marquez, jinking far away from the left rear quarter panel of the number 63 machine. 5 seconds, that margin as well. Yeah, they so focused on their tussle with each other that even last lap, Van de Sant lost 3/10 up the road to Benzi, who's comfortably in that podium spot. GT3s, by the way, has started to stretch out a little bit between the likes of Chin, Otis, Campbell, and Vigo. Still 2 seconds or so between the top two. Sean Campbell within drafting range of the Synergy Motorsports car, and then Vigo struggling to hold on to the coattails of the WMP Racing car. Right now, you said that Sean Campbell was feeling the pressure, something that I do think I agreed with watching the car in the first stint of the race. But I think really what he was doing was just setting himself up with strategy for the back half of this race.
Yeah, but I don't think that Campbell can feel comfortable by any stretch of the imagination at this point in the race. He has gained back basically about 1.5 seconds to Josh Chin in the lead of the race, but at the same time, like, I don't know how comfortable I'd be if I'm Campbell, because certainly if you start getting into a battle with Ryan Otis for second, Chin could very easily start to knock that gap back up again, because you're not in drafting range of the leader, even if you get back up to Ryan Otis. So there's a lot of moving parts here for Campbell if he wants to keep his streak alive.
The thing to remember as well is the fact that there's not as much traffic as there maybe should have been here today, which removes a bit of jeopardy for Campbell, and not just in terms of the physical damage to the car, but in how much time he'll lose through each corner of traffic, because we saw in the big incident, the big one we'll call it, that there was the dive from an LMDH car that a GT3 then had to leave room for. Those are the things that you have to worry about a little bit less now that there are, maybe 10 LMDH cars still running. Honestly, not even sure about that one. What we should probably do, though, since it is one of those races where things are just a tad slow, is we can go ahead and talk about our GT3 race leader, who is also today's BMW Performance Driving School driver profile. And Joshua Chin, someone that traditionally does like a bit of downforce on his cars, and so in his open wheel career, 58 starts, 36 top 10s, 25 top 5s, of which he's had 6 wins, 3 pole positions, his first win coming in the very first season that he competed. Josh is someone that has struggled for practice time in the last couple of years with a slightly different work schedule, but whenever he's out in Lionheart competition, we do know he's going to be up towards the front.
Yeah, he's certainly one of the more rapid drivers that we've had in the Lionheart series. As you say, maybe not necessarily the practice time that he really wanted to maximize his full potential, but any time that I see Josh on the track, whether it's in front of me or whether it was in my mirror, it was always, you knew that he was going forward, and you knew that he was pushing to the limit not just in terms of maybe aggression, but also just pushing the limit of fuel and physics in general, in terms of his ability to save every last bit of his car for the end and have that last bit of fight for every last position.
What I will say is there have been races that I've been racing against Josh Chin where he's gone 2-3 laps longer than me, and I've thought, how is that possible? And sometimes I've looked at the lap times and gone, that's why that's possible. He still leads, though, here in our BMW Performance Center Grand Prix at the Glen, presented by Butt Kicker. Halfway through the race, half still left to go. The run to the checkered flag coming up next on RaceSpotTV. Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and to upstate New York. We're live for round 4 of the Butt Kicker Sportscar Series, the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix at the Glen, presented by Butt Kicker. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, alongside, as always, the one, the only Andrew Kinsella. Don't forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to racespot.tv/timing. Halfway through the race, still one pit stop cycle left to go, and we've just seen a swap around in the GT3 class. Sean Campbell climbing past Ryan Otis to work his way forward to second, but in what's been a rather attrition-heavy race so far, Andrew, with 40 minutes still left to go, it's the GT3 class that looks like it's the most intriguing.
It certainly does. I think that we're getting set up here for a really interesting finish, because what we're learning here is that the three-tire stop that we presume that Chin and Otis took on that first pit stop, it definitely took less time for them to do it, but the 4 tires is definitely the faster way in terms of actual pace over the course of the stint. So we're assuming that Campbell is going to be taking 3 tires on the next stop. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, particularly with Josh Chin, who's still 2 and some odd seconds in front of Sean Campbell, how this all shakes out, because I think that we're not done in terms of strategy and we're not done in terms of fighting just yet.
Still don't necessarily think that Sean Campbell is going to gamble on tires if he can avoid it. I do think it's important to note that the tire that I think Josh Chin did not take is the right front tire. If you're thinking about the way that Watkins Glen works, you've got more right-hand turns than left-hand turns, especially at speed, and so that right front tire doesn't take as much of the load. as the left front, especially given the track temperatures that we've got right now. If you're joining us on RaceSpotTV, I see plenty of conversation about engine noises and how cars sound. We're talking about the Lotus 79. Don't forget Lionheart Retro Series back in action this coming Thursday for the first of their Triple Crowns as we head over to the Tricky Triangle. Now, I've been quite vocal, and as one of the voices of the BMW M Sim Cup, it's maybe not right for me to say that I don't like the sound of the BMW M4 GT3 car, but I also don't like the way that my washing machine sounds.
I mean, it just doesn't have the same punch that some of the other GT3 cars does it?
It's the turbo. Every turbo-powered GT3 car sounds worse than every non-turbo GT3 car. I can tell you this from actually hearing them in person now.
I would tend to agree. There's just something about, like, you can do a turbo well, you know, like the old chip car turbos. Those were heavenly because you turn so many revs that the whine of the turbo sort of melded into the sound of the engine. But with this, you get the mechanical sound of the engine at low RPMs, and then the whine of the turbo, and they just clash, you know.
It's got 590-ish horsepower, does this M4 GT3 engine, all dependent on BOP per series. So traditionally when you talk about power in GT3 engines, it's with an asterisk next to it at the end of the day. 6-speed gearbox, yeah, I don't really want to talk too much more about the engine. Let's listen in very quickly then with the BMW M Hybrid V8, which doesn't sound bad, don't get me wrong. I don't think it sounds necessarily as great as some of the other LMDH cars or hypercars. I do love the base for this engine, though, and the way that it ended up being revitalized. This is the engine that BMW used to run in their old DTM cars.
Very interesting. I didn't know about that. But you can tell that it is definitely at least from my ears, a little bit purer of a racing engine. It just revs that little bit higher and a little bit freer, and I don't know, I like this sound a lot more than the GT3 car, I will say that.
It is still twin turbo, but you're right, it revs higher. I think this is up to 8.3, 8.4K, something like that, at RPM, whereas the GT3s, especially turbo GT3s, you're lucky if you get up to 6,000 RPM nowadays with those cars. I'm pretty sure there's some way you're shifting at 5,500 RPM, which no thank you. The concept of an energy budget is also something that, Andrew, I find so intriguing. Before we dive off into the rulebooks, are you already familiar with the concept of an energy budget?
I'm gonna be honest here. I haven't followed.
No good.
All of the stuff that's gone on with.
Because my lack of knowledge now is not going to be. You're not going to get into me for my lack of knowledge. But it's like my basic understanding is that in balance of performance in GT3 cars, sometimes you'll limit fuel capacity sizes, right? How much fuel a car can carry, which limits how far it can go in a race. But now we're not just talking about fuel in these hybrids, right? Because you've got engine with the battery power as well. It's charged by the engine, whatever you've got, right? And so you're not talking about a fuel budget anymore. You've now got a combined energy budget, which is what you're BOP'd with, which is... Engineers are smart.
Yeah, so for me, the one thing about that is at a certain point, to me, there's just too much BOP.
Oh, let's not have this discussion, because...
like, when you get into total energy, like, if I can design a more efficient hybrid system for an LMDH car, I feel like you should get rewarded for that. You know what I mean?
I agree. That's motorsports at its core, right? Is that if you are more innovative within the rule set, you should be rewarded, which I agree with. However, unfortunately, BOP is an inevitable reality in the modern world of motorsports.
It is, particularly in a sport like sports car racing, where
yes,
you have so many different manufacturers and so many different concepts. But I do like, I don't know, I mean, I'm an IndyCar fan first and foremost, or an open wheel fan first and foremost, so the approach that both IndyCar and to a lesser extent Formula One, but even Formula One with the new more spec chassis that they have, I like that way of balancing performance better than the sports car way. But that's probably I'm probably going to start a fight with you on that one.
You cannot sit there and tell me that spec Formula One chassis or anything have made it more equitable when Red Bull have turned up this year with a car that legitimately breaks DRS.
But when was the last time that you had a car go from ninth on the ninth best car on the grid to the second or third best car on the grid in one season?
We might be seeing that kind of right now. With
Aston Martin has absolutely done that this year.
Yes.
When was the last time that happened? And wasn't just a wholesale rule change.
They've done it a few times, to be fair. Aston Martin, the artists formerly known as Racing Point, the artists formerly known as Force India. No, but they've quite drastically gone back and forth in the past. But overall, you're right.
But not to this extent. Like, not going from, like, barely being able to make it out of Q3 to, we're contending for podiums every single race now.
The problem is, even within spec series, as we right on the cusp, by the way, of the final pit stop window, even in spec series, I'll take IndyCar as the example here, right? Dampers are free game, right? So there's a lot of setting and development work that goes into that. You go to Formula 2, you go to Formula 3. You think they're all the same cars, but the engines are not. The engine that you pay for might be very different from the engine that I pay for. And so ultimately, there's no equality in motorsports. And so what we should really do is, we're on the same page here, is just have no equality and it's a free-for-all.
As long as
within the
there's
rules.
some way to limit the budget so that we actually have cars on the grid, sure.
That's the thing, though, right? That's where the catch comes in, is if you allow open development, then you get the LMP1 cars where we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year to run those programs.
And then suddenly you only have 2 cars at Le Mans or Circuit de la Sarthe.
Well, these cars are still not cheap. I think the quoted number was 20.
But they are orders of magnitude cheaper than the
fair. We're
final iteration of the prototype cars were.
I think we're probably talking 20 million a year per car to run it over a season. I think the raw number for just the car, probably about 6-ish million pocket change at the end of the day. Here's Joshua Chin in his BMW off to pit lane, and as expected, coming in early. Gonna be a lengthy pit stop for him. Hopefully filters out into some clean air.
Yeah, so this is going to be very telling here. So he comes in right at, I think this is the 3-tire strategy. He came in probably, I'd say maybe a minute and a half, so a lap, maybe 2 laps earlier than he probably was hoping for, but he was just starting to lose too much time to Sean Campbell. So the question is, with the fresh tires, with this undercut again, will the undercut be enough to come out in front of Sean Campbell, or will Campbell gamble on the 3-tire strategy to maybe come out in front of Chin, try and hold him off that way?
25 seconds on the dot, by the way, for the pit stop, so that does seem to be the 4-tire number. So pretty easy guess for us whether Campbell took 4 or 3. It's going to be how long that he spends in pit lane. I did see a comment, I believe, from one of the Hydro Geodesic Racing team members in RaceSpotTV that Badefer and Kraus, gap's closing. The gap's closed and grown more times than I've cared to count. It's been holding relatively constant between 1.5, 2-ish seconds. It's been as small as a second. It's been as much as 2.53 seconds. It's why we say the traffic gives and the traffic takes.
Yes, and I will say, having raced against both Badefer and Kraus on a number of different occasions, I can tell you that both of them right now, they're just sort of like maintaining it and just working that gap, although Kraus really just got closed off by a GT3 car there, and that cost him almost half a second. But both of them are just sort of experts at taking what the car and this point of the race is sort of giving them. And they're really good at just sort of maintaining a constant gap. So it doesn't shock me that they've been going back and forth lap after lap with the traffic especially.
For a moment, Kraus had lost out, and I think here he's actually going to win, because into the penultimate corner, Baderford's going to get slightly checked up on exit as he tries to work now to the outside of that GT3 car, get back up to 1.5 seconds, and it's as quick as that. One corner, you're holding on to the draft. The next corner, you're right up beneath the rear bumper. And speaking of being right up beneath the rear bumper, one of the Hydra Race geodesic racing machines is slowly being able to do that as Vigo closes on Ryan Otis. And so, unfortunately, Miguel Vigo trying to go on the same strategy as Sean Campbell, not able to stay in the draft of Sean Campbell. But I'd say Vigo's still in a pretty good spot for, if not second place, because Josh Chin might have something to say about that, to battle for third with Otis.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of racing still to be done for the top 4 in GT3. I don't think that any of these battles are done. And certainly if Campbell and Chin sort of come out in relatively similar positions on track, then we're liable to have a door-to-door battle here, as it looks like Otis and Vigo are in both on the same lap here. So big decision here. Otis and Vigo, they came in the lap last time, they came in on the same lap as well, and so we're gonna have to see if any strategy comes into play with Vigo. We know that Otis took the 3 tires last time. Will Vigo take the 3 tires this time?
Do you do 3 tires if you're Vigo?
I think you have to. I think track position here actually does make a big difference in these GT3 cars.
He hasn't gone up on the jacks at all,
which is interesting.
Now, is he really going to try a no-tire call here, or is this some sort of a pit stop error? It doesn't seem to be, because Otis dropped. Vigo does 20.7 seconds, and I think no tires.
That's... I think that has to be some kind of error from Vigo.
Well, Josh Chin's going to emerge still in the net lead of the battle for second spot, you'd say. It's Vigo that's now going to just be trying to fend off Ryan Otis.
Yeah, if in fact that was no tires, then to me that was a mistake. Meanwhile, we have Betafor and Kraus on pit lane this time by. Both of your leaders and Van de Sant in from third. Bensi had already pitted.
Yeah, again, not too worried about Bensi, but as Kraus drops and rolls, Betafor still up on the jacks. It's a little bit longer of a stop for Betafor, 1.6 seconds longer, and so the margin between first and second going to grow to about 3.5 now, with 26 minutes to go. Betafor going to be pushing right up to the checkered.
Yeah, really interesting that Betafor had the longer pit stop there. You would think that both of them would have had some similar lap, similar pit stop time there, but it can just be a small error that causes that to happen. Something as simple as being too far to the left or too far to the right as you pull into your pit stall, it could have been disastrous for Betafor. We didn't see him coming down on the pit lane there, but 3.5 seconds is a long way to come back in 26 minutes, but it's not unheard of, and it's definitely still doable, particularly if they catch traffic the right way. But Betafor will really have to push here.
So Chris Staples bails onto pit lane with 25.5 plus minutes to go. That's a bit of a bottleneck for Betafor, working past one of those GT3 machines up through to the exit of the boot section. 25 minutes to go. Quick check in with your track conditions as well, because they haven't really come down in the way that I was thinking they might. They've been pegged at 53 degrees Celsius, and so as we wait for Sean Campbell, the word from our delightful YouTube chat is that Miguel Vigo's a lunatic, which I assume means no tires went onto the 66.
I mean, it's a call.
Well,
I don't think it's a good call, but it is a call.
One thing I'll just point out is the fact that in the real world, GT3 cars do tend to do an hour. Just because of we have a fuel capacity restriction that means that we do about 30 minutes. The tires are capable of doing an hour. Doesn't mean it's necessarily faster to do an hour on them.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm more concerned about is not necessarily whether the tires will last, but whether the tires will last in any form that resembles an actual grippy tire.
Here's Chris Reagan, who is yet to come down pit lane. Should still be net second in the AM class. Not going to be, where was he? Where was Chris Staples? Up in 6th position. 8th or 9th for Reagan in an AM championship that's going to get pretty healthily mixed up, although I'll give full credit, full kudos to the likes of Chase Wilson, who in that Twisted Motorsports number 13 could have very well taken that incident at the start, Andrew, and said, you know what, I'm done for the day. No, he's headed back out onto track, 17th in the combined GT3 class. Endurance racing spirit.
Yep, we got a few of those. Graham Sanders being another one. 19 laps behind your race leader. He is out there making time, and he has actually passed Michael O'Brien and David Sirwa now, so that's a couple of positions for Sanders there, and every little point counts, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's quite a few of these drivers. Sirwa is 26 laps down from the leader. O'Brien and Sanders actually going to be fighting to the end because they are both 20 laps down. 5 seconds splits them. I'll be pushing all the way to the very end. Sean Campbell's on to lap 17, so we're probably due to see him to pit road in 2 or 3 laps time. The fact that Campbell's gone so long, I think, indicates to me that he is not going to take many tires. He's not going to need that much fuel. He might be able to legitimately do 2 tires, but I'll just flash back to last week, Andrew, where that almost cost him the call to be quite aggressive with tires.
Yeah, and last week he was ahead of Chin going into the final pit stop sequence. This time he's well behind. He was 2 or 3 seconds behind Chin going into the sequence, so I don't know. It's a tough call for me if you're Sean Campbell. Like, on the one hand, you definitely want to have fresh tires for the battle at the end, but you also want to find a way to get by Chin in pit lane, because we've seen that, particularly in the GT3 field, it's difficult to pass out there. Despite the draft, there hasn't been necessarily a lot of wheel-to-wheel action on track, so I don't know. It's a really uncomfortable position for Campbell right now, and he's got to make sure that whatever strategy he makes, he executes it 100%.
There is the WMP Racing number 26. Going to get quite boring talking to Sean Campbell week after week after week. So we might have to make come up with some interesting questions to start asking Sean Campbell. Speaking of interesting questions, we might have some interesting ones for Phil Krause, who, after previous victories already in 2023 in the Lionheart Retro and Open Wheel Series, looks like he might be able to grab a 3rd win in a 3rd series in Lionheart competition in 2023. Now, I'll be honest, I have not gone back in the history books to go and look at this. But that we've had years where there's been 2 competitions in Lionheart. The Open Wheel and the Retro Series. We added the Speedway a couple of years ago to make it 3. I don't think anyone's ever won in all 3 of the series before.
Not off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone.
I know that you'll have people like Adam Blocker who probably have won in the Retro Series and in the Open Wheel Series in the same year, but I'm just saying that doing in 3 different series in 3 very different cars is quite an impressive feat. Campbell does go up on the jack, so at the very least 2 tires, stationary for 17.5 seconds. And so as Campbell drops and rolls with Josh Chin yet to walk on to the back straightaway, as soon as Campbell relieves himself of that pit limiter, we'll get a sense of how big the gap is going to be. About 7-ish seconds it seems to be stabilizing at.
Yeah, so Campbell well in front of Josh Chin here, so Chin has got to get on his horse and hope that Campbell's tires aren't as good as they seem to be at this point, but that's a bigger gap than I think I was expecting coming out of that pit stop cycle.
The question now just becomes, 20 minutes to go, how much tire does Campbell realistically have to hold on? Vigo has ended up in front of Otis, so the battle for the 3rd and final step of the podium might be really where we're looking at the front of this GT3 field. For some of the GT3 AMs, though, there's still some excitement for them. You've got Trevor Malone and Chris Reagan. Reagan's come out behind Malone with the pit stop cycle. This, the battle for 2nd in AM.
And it's a nice battle that's been going on for a few laps now with Malone and Reagan. Obviously, Reagan... we were talking about him a little bit earlier. He's been doing a real good job here all of these drivers that are sort of left in this race, they've all sort of whoa, that was a big moment for Malone. I was about to praise the drivers here, saying that the drivers who have sort of understood the assignment here today, which is just get to the finish of this race and collect the points. But then Malone goes and has a moment like that right in front of a couple of LMDHs as well. So these drivers are no doubt still pushing, but definitely making it to the end of this race is definitely order one for all of these drivers here today.
And now that there are 13-ish LMDHs back out on track, there is a decent amount of traffic that they're having to contend with. If you're wondering why the field is decimated, I think it's probably the most fitting word to describe what we've seen here today. Here's a glimpse back at what was this? Laps 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that ballpark. It was monumental. We'll take a look from up above, and I think the replay will say it all.
Valiokis with the optimistic move on a GT3 car, and it just kicked off a hellacious impact for Adam Blocker. Collected Graham Sanders. Austin Young had an incident the lap before with the GT3 car. You can just see nowhere for Adam Blocker to go, and just very big impact there.
And Blocker, someone that races in VR, that looks like an interesting ride. Now Vigo has made a mistake, I think, because Otis has slipped on through up into the 3rd position.
Well, is this the no-tire strategy just not playing out here, Arjuna?
I'm trying to be optimistic, because if Miguel Vigo made the choice to not take tires, I want to believe it was for a reason. We'll see if we can take a look. Might have to go back a little bit in time to try and figure this one out. Lights flashing from Otis, the universal sign of move over, let me through. Through turn 1, something going to happen to Vigo? Is he just...
I just think he just doesn't have the drive right now. He's got an LMDH coming up the inside, and he just doesn't have the grip in the tires right now. He's having to pedal the car in places where you really wouldn't expect it, and I don't think he's putting up much of a fight for Otis. He knows that he can't really do anything with this much time left in the race. Otis was always going to find a way by him.
Yeah, that was. I was almost wondering if there was like a slowdown, but no real indications of that. Vigo now going to try and hold on to 4th position. Matthew Mohart full 9 seconds back with 17 minutes to go. We'll see how close he's going to be able to get in the closing stages. Betafer within 2.4 as that gap closes up at the front of the field in the LMDHs. It's also close for 3rd as Matt Taylor now within 1 second of Caleb Benzie. Van der Sat had a very long previous stop, probably getting some damage repair on his car, and so as Matt Taylor in that Graphics LC car up the inside of some lap traffic, out of a 3rd, starting to close on up.
I'm not sure if it was damage repair or whether it was speeding on pit lane for Van der Sant, but either way, it was a very, very long stop, and it's put the number 96 basically firmly in that 5th position as long as he doesn't make a mistake, but he has no chance of getting back to Taylor. It's all about Benzie and Taylor for 3rd now.
See if we can take a look at maybe what if it was a speeding infringement for Van der Sant. This is not really a track where you do tend to see too much pit lane speeding on entry, partly just because of the fact that the way that the pit lane entry is kind of parked on the racing line means that you're trying to be as obvious to the other drivers that you are coming down to pit lane so they are not going to rear end you. Maybe if Van der Sant was involved in a fight, it might explain what went on here. Let's take a look at that pit lane entry. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a hot entry.
Now, you can actually get away with a little bit at Watkins Glen. Because
not that much.
Yes, not that much, though.
He was a good 12 mile an hour too fast at the line there, Arjuna.
Yes, no, as we lose him behind the trees, but see ya, unfortunately, in terms of the speeding there. Taylor back to 1.5 seconds from Benzie through traffic once again. 15 minutes left to run in this race. 75 minutes are down, and it comes down to these final sprints. Here's Vigo back on the charge. He's got Otis in his sights. Don't think he's going to go for the move just yet, though. Save your tires. Wait for the final couple of laps.
Now, Arjuna, correct me if I'm wrong, but Miguel Vigo at Hockenheim, he ran out with 1 to go, correct?
Oh, no. Don't tell me that he might have cut himself a little bit close again.
Well, we know that he likes to cut it close with fuel, so I wonder if he had to strategically let Otis by, and he is now all over the back of Otis specifically to save fuel.
Carlos Villa jumps into the RaceSpotTV chat to say that his tires are just dead. The gamble did not pay out. I'm sure he probably doesn't want to be reminded of what happened at the Hockenheim Ring as Matt Taylor. That's not a parking space, Matt, unfortunately, and as he tries to spin it back around, fortunately a big gap back to Alexander Van der Sande, but surely if you crash in a high-speed place like that, your car's crabbing, and he is full left hand down to try and keep it in a straight line.
Yeah, that is not just left hand down, that is the wheel is 180 degrees from where it's supposed to be there, Arjuna. It is that is not a happy car right now.
Let's check it out. Oh, traffic. Oh no. He spooked himself. He spooked himself there, and the GT3 car does a great job to avoid it.
Yeah, I hope the GT3 escaped with as little damage as possible there, because that was certainly not what not the GT3 car's fault there. The GT3 was just minding his own business. He even left Taylor enough room, and then Taylor he went for the gap, but he cut it too close, hit the curb, and just lost it. Again,
it's the discrepancy in speed, the delta that we have that's so high that is making these traffic interactions just that little bit more dangerous. Phil Krause almost gets himself checked up behind this battle for third and fourth positions. If you're wondering who that GT3 car was, it was Chris Staples, our AM race leading machine. We'll see how his lap times trend. And
he's
unfortunately, he has just rolled down to pit lane. You can see the damage to the left side of the car. That left front wheel is pointing the wrong way.
Oh, such a crushing blow for Chris Staples there. He'd done such a good job, and again, that wasn't his fault. It was just him getting collected, and I think it was the secondary impact with the wall after Matt Taylor came back across the track that did Chris Staples in there. But, such a shame.
Well, Staples' misfortune is now Malone O'Regan's delight as they battle within 2 car lengths of one another for the AM class win. In towards the carousel they'll go. Malone a little bit compromised on entry, parks on apex, not going to give Reagan the opportunity to slide on through. You wondered about fuel. I'm slightly wondering about fuel up and down through the field now once again, but I think Chris Reagan's got a great chance of being able to leapfrog Malone here.
I think he does as well, but at the same time, he's going to have to time it well. Of course, Malone is in the team car, I believe, with Chris Reagan, so he's now that he's inherited that lead, so to speak. Oh no, sorry, I'm mistaken. He's not on the same team with Reagan this year, but.
Trevor Malone's always an independent. He flies to the beat of his own drum.
Yeah, he very much does, yes.
I know what you're trying to say, though. Elite West Racing, number 19, final laps of the race. Don't go for it now. Draft is so important. Keep yourself within touching distance and then try and send it in those final couple of laps. Baderfer is really having a good go of it, by the way, in trying to close the margin to Phil Krause. He's got nothing to lose, and he's about to split the traffic, isn't he? Up the middle he'll go, exiting the boot.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to commit yourself to a move like that, and he does, and that's going to gain him probably a tenth or two, as Krause is also negotiating traffic, and I think Baderfer comes out the better part of that exchange there. Just a little bit checked up on exit, but Krause is also negotiating that, so it's fascinating watching the give and take, race in and race out, but you just get the sense that Baderfer, he's lurking, he's getting faster, but I just don't think he has quite enough time, Arjuna.
I think I agree with you. It's going to take a big block, if anything, for Krause to be close enough, or even draft to Baderfer. At this rate, you'd have to say, with 10 minutes to go, about 90-second lap times, we are definitely into these closing laps, and I do think in terms of fuel, we should be good across the board, just because of when everyone came down on towards the safety of pit lane. Now, that's a very broken M4, is it? No, that's just Logan Spath trying to get himself back up to speed. After starting down the back of the pack, he's plus 12, the biggest mover in the GT3s.
And that just goes to show you, when you have one of these chaotic races like we've had today, sometimes just getting out there and putting in lap after lap, it doesn't matter necessarily how fast you're going, as long as you can keep yourself out of trouble, as Spath has seemed to do so far. You can see he got well out of the path of everyone. He got a little bit loose through the carousel, but got out of the path of everyone there. And yeah, he's just done a good job of basically allowing faster cars by him, and he's just not...
there's something that went wrong. There is a monitor that went dead or something there, because he went all the way down into first gear for a second. Technical failures are a part of racing. That was a very brief technical failure, if that was really the case.
Yeah, I've had my VR freeze, and I've done something similar to that, so that could be... I'm not sure if he's in VR, but or if he's on a monitor, but it was definitely more along the lines of a monitor freeze than like a pedal or a wheel failure.
I'll tell that story in a second. Sean Campbell leads by 11.2 seconds.
I think I know what story you're talking about.
Do you? Because this is actually not one of my stories.
Okay, never mind then.
Okay, no, this is a story about Gamer Muscle, who was racing in the Porsche All-Stars. But he had been streaming for a while, and his setup used TVs. And for people that have used LG TVs in the past, they'll know that some of them have settings to restart the TVs automatically if they've been on for a certain amount of time. And so he's mid-race in the Porsche All-Stars. And he realizes, because it pops up the message that your monitors are going to, your TVs are going to restart in 5 minutes. He's like, they're going to do it mid-race. And so midway down the Mulsanne somewhere, it's a long straight, he's fiddling with the remote, trying to turn off all his monitors and turn them back on.
Amazing. And was he successful?
What's your definition of success?
Not crashing.
He did not crash. So success, yes.
That's as close to success in that situation as you're going to get.
That clip is worth its weight in gold. It is fantastic. Back in with your AM class leaders. I keep getting myself mixed up trying to say that properly. Reagan, a couple of car lengths further back, working up the hill once again. Now Phil Krause finds himself well past these drivers already. I don't think they're going to get lapped again, which means they probably have 5 or 6 laps to figure this out amongst themselves. The same can probably be said for Ryan Otis and Miguel Vigo. If Vigo's really going to give it a go with tires that are probably well past their sell-by date.
Yeah, I find it difficult to believe that Vigo is going to be able to do much of anything with Ryan Otis. Just with how solid a driver Otis is, he just doesn't make mistakes, and I think it's going to take a mistake for Vigo to be able to find a way by on those older tires. So I think right now Vigo's just, the gamble didn't pay off, so he's just sort of content to ride, if you're asking me.
At the end of the day as well, if I'm Vigo, I'm pretty happy just to get some points on the board. First couple of rounds of the season, we're not the easiest to Miguel Vigo. Sebring was brutal at the end of the day.
That was not much better.
That was not much better. The gamble, though, is one that I don't want to say I'll question, but Miguel Vigo, I think, is going to reflect on afterwards and say, was it really worth the gamble? Because 3 tires would have given him the same amount of pit stop time, but would have left him with at least something to defend, as he's got an LMDH getting very squirrely up his inside.
Yeah, like, you had to take at least 2 tires, if not 3, if you're Miguel Vigo, to really make the strategy work. And I would argue that I'm surprised that not more of the GT3 leaders took the same strategy as Campbell, as we watch Van de Sant get around that battle there. But it was interesting that Chin came down early. Vigo and Otis both came down the same time on both pit stops, and neither of them really tried to extend as long as Campbell did. And clearly Campbell found the right strategy here, because he's 11, now 12 seconds in front of Josh Chin, where he was 2.5 seconds behind Chin going into the final cycle.
You know what I think this is a little bit of? Is Sean Campbell played fuel games in the first stint. we were wondering if he was struggling. No. He was waiting for his time to start pushing because his lap times have been pretty flying in this final stint of the race, especially given that he went the longest of them all in that second stint. And so really impressed with Sean Campbell again. And at some point we were going to have to add some success ballast to his number 26 machine. Back up front for a moment though, as we see Phil Kraus out of the S's. It's 3 seconds the margin between Kraus and Baedefer. You said Baedefer running out of time, maybe running out of pace at this point.
Yeah, I think Baedefer's just sort of settled into his fate at this point, realized that it's just not worth the extra risks that he's going to have to take to get up to Phil Kraus. And Kraus has been putting in some really solid lap times as well. But this isn't necessarily just even Baedefer not wanting to catch up to Kraus. It's just that Kraus has found the rhythm here in this third stint, and he's really put the pedal to the metal and just put in lap after lap. And I think the spread out nature of the GT3 field has really played into his hand as well, where he's just catching 1 or 2 cars a lap, maybe 3 or 4 on a bad lap, but at the same time he's able to spread out the moves, and there's just never been a point where he's truly been held up enough for Baedefer to capitalize.
This time at the line, we might actually get 3 laps to go. Remember, lap times are around 1 minute 28 fastest for the LMDHs, so we cross the line with 3:03. I do think that's going to mean 3 more laps to run, 1 more lap longer than I think maybe some may have anticipated. Fuel again creeping to the forefront of my mind. One thing that I will say, I think quite confidently, Andrew, is if we didn't get a safety car today, we're not getting a safety car for the rest of this season.
I still maintain that Motorsport could see a safety car.
Motorsport maybe. Where else, realistically though, could we see one? We're not going to see one at Silverstone because we know how wide open everything is there. Imola might be one, Suzuka, but traditionally we don't see cautions on road courses, period, on iRacing. The exception to that rule has tended to be our visits over to Watkins Glen.
This is very true. At the end of the day, though, I like it when these races really go the full distance, because you do get some of the strategy involved. And when you get a caution early on, for me, it basically, I mean, I know that some people roll the strategy dice with those cautions and stuff like that, but for me, you really are committed to a single strategy, which is go as long as possible and make that final stint as short as possible. I know that some people disagree with me, but I think that Sean Campbell has shown today just how powerful that strategy is.
You also do it just anticipating temperatures maybe dropping off in the closing stages. Now, of note, Barney did not have the white flag in hand, which he would usually do if we were going on to the final lap. So I do think that means 2 to go. Malone and Reagan still separated by about half a second, still have 2.5 laps effectively to run because they find their way working to the boot. Still separated by too much, and Van der Sant gets the elbows out and moves Malone out of the way momentarily. Not going to allow Reagan the opportunity to slide on through, but it's a nervy moment there for sure, as Austin Young, our pole position winner, unfortunately, is going to end this race. I think he would have hoped that maybe the race would have ended back with that incident at the very start.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty big moment there for Austin Young. And one thing I do want to cover is we talked about our. He just went way too deep into that corner. One thing I do quickly want to mention before we get to the end of this race: Chris Staples is back out there, as is Chase Wilson, and they are actually both on the same lap, 12 laps behind the LMDH leader. But Staples is leading, so the battle for the AM Championship not shaping out the way we were thinking it was going to today, Arjuna, but it is still a battle.
Important points. There's the white flag, and so Phil Kraus crosses the line with 4 seconds left on the clock, ticks us on over to lap number 60, white flag in hand for the BMW Performance Center Grand Prix at the Glen, presented by Butt Kicker. Baedefer 3.5 seconds back, still well and in control, is Phil Kraus. I still think Chris Reagan's got a shot here. And you mentioned that for Chase Wilson, for Chris Staples, bad luck for them today. Let's not forget that Trevor Malone's 5th. You've got Chris Reagan 4th in points. These could be big swings in the very early stage of the championship for these drivers.
Absolutely. We're only on round 4 and we're still seeing big swings happen, and this is what's going to be characteristic of that AM championship all year long, is these big swings that can happen where one misstep and suddenly it's 20-30 point swings in one direction or another. So it's going to be very interesting to watch the AM championship in particular. But right now, this is the battle on track. This is all the action that's happening. And Staples, I think he saved it just long enough. The question is, can he make that last pass happen?
And they're fortunate. You'll notice, well, you won't notice, just behind them coming out of that boot section is Phil Kraus. These drivers will get one more lap to battle by virtue of their positioning on track. Phil Kraus, though, about to set more Lionheart history. He's already won in the Open Wheel and the Retro Series in 2023. Phil Kraus finally on top in the Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. A almost perfect start to 2023 for the private label Team Hype number 91. He'll celebrate in HyperX Victory Lane as Sean Campbell makes it 4 wins in 4 attempts. That WMP racing machine is unstoppable at the top of the GT3 class. Still a full lap to go, though, for Trevor Malone and Chris Reagan. Malone looks like he might be able to hang on to that AM class win.
Yeah, it's been really tight here. Reagan he needed to have a little bit more of a draft, but he's got one more opportunity through this boot section that he might just be able to chuck it up the inside here. But he's going to have to get as close as possible through this section. I don't think he's going to have enough. There was a little bit of bobble there coming down through the chute. It's just a little bit too far away for Chris Reagan.
He ran out of car, it felt like, more than time. Maybe the tire loads that these drivers are having to contend with, just really making it a bit of a struggle bus at the end of this race. Ultimately, though, for both of these drivers, given what a tumultuous day it was, just staying out of trouble, half the victory here today, and so they'll come across the line with 2 relatively undamaged machines. And for Malone and Reagan, 1 and 2 in AM, it will be 7th and 8th in the combined championship GT3 class, where, of course, they score points.
Whoa!
As that's a very slow Creighton Carter trying to work his way to the line, having already taken the checkered flag. Malone hits the wall. It's not going to matter. It's the AM class victory going the way of Trevor Malone. The independent driver comes out on top in Watkins Glen.
Real solid drive there from Malone. Did exactly what he needed to do, and just brought that car home in one piece. A little bit of interesting in the last couple of corners there, but solid drive from your AM class winner.
Let's grab a look at your Butt Kicker race results. Phil Kraus, 3.5 seconds clear at the front in the LMDH class. 60 laps later, walks away with the victory here in your BMW Performance Center Grand Prix at the Glen, presented by Butt Kicker. Beta for second, Bensi third, his first podium of the season, while Alexander Van der Sant, Alex Guyon, Tyler Graf, and then even Mike Rasmussen 7 laps down, all recipients of what was a bloodbath in the LMDH class. Austin Young on pole position recovers to 8th after a self-inflicted sort of an incident in through turn 1. In front of the likes of Taylor and Beard, the rest of your top 10. And then we get into the graveyard. Sanders, Silra, O'Brien, Lazier, Valiokas, Blocker, Fowler. 17 started. Not many ended up making it to the end without some sort of damage on their machine. In GT3, status quo at the top. Sean Campbell continues to be the unassailable force in this Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. Josh Chin on the slightly different strategy, able to grab second in front of Ryan Otis. That battle for second in the championship's looking really fun. Miguel Vigo tried to gamble. It did not work. Finishes just outside of the podium positions. Then a big healthy margin back to Matthew Morhart as Synergy Motorsports continue to look strong in the HyperX team standings. Graphics LC Corbo and Andrew Marquez represented in 6th, with Trevor Malone, the AM class winner, in 7th, just clear of Chris Reagan. Final car scored on your leading lap. Diego Lehner, Paulson, your top 10 in the combined GT3 field, with Logan Spath, the biggest of the movers in the class, 12 positions gained in front of Drew White, Creighton Carter, Chris Staples, and then Christopher Hill, the top 15. Clint Martin, Chase Wilson, Jim Herrick, Craig Forsyth, and then Carlos Villa through your top 20, with plenty of drivers sticking out there and trying to recover some extra positions, Deropoli, Wood and Mole round out the 23 GT3 machines that took to the green flag. And so with that, we head on over in towards our butt kicker post-race show, and very shortly to be standing by from HyperX Victory Lane, not just with Phil Krause, but for the 4th round in a row, we'll have a chance to chat with Sean Campbell. Sean, it seemed like you were keeping things quite loose and calm in that first stint of the race, chatting with us on RaceSpotTV, but was fuel saving at the forefront of your mind even back then?
Yeah, I noticed. I was trying to break away right at the start, and I couldn't do it, so I started to fuel save, and I noticed that, I noticed at least that Miguel and them were fuel saving a fair amount, so I started, like, defend fuel saving, you know, like, to kind of try and slow it down just a bit. Might have done it too much, though, because Josh jumped us by, like, 4 seconds, but I know he took less fuel. I'm almost certain of it, considering we went just about 6 laps longer in the second stint.
I can confirm he was stationary for 19 seconds. He took 3 tires. What was going through your mind heading into that final stint when you saw the gaps? Were you pretty calm at that point? Because if anything, you increased your pace at the end of the race.
I just tried to be smooth. I looked at the gap. I considered taking all 4s because of what happened at Hockenheim, but I took left sides again only. And it paid off this time. The tire wear was high enough. Well, like the percentage was high enough to where I didn't get near the cliff this time.
What was the percentage at the end?
42% on the right sides and 75 on the left.
So a little bit better off. Congratulations on another race victory, Sean. We'll see you next month as we head over to the Circuit of the Americas.
All right.
From Sean Campbell, we'll make our way over to Josh Chin. Tried a slightly different strategy, Josh. Still grabbed second. You must be pretty happy, all things considered.
Yeah, second's a lot better than I feel like it was last week, but it kind of sucks to get gapped by 4 or 5 seconds the last stint by someone that took less tires. I thought I had maybe a winning shot with how the draft was and everything, but the second stint just never came together, and the third stint really was where the win was solidified for Sean. I can't argue a second, especially with Miguel and Ryan having good races and avoiding a lot of the chaos that happened in the LMDH field.
Outside of that chaos, it does look like we are going to have some fun with you, Ryan Otis, and Miguel Vigo. You guys all seem pretty close on pace, and it does seem like you have enough opportunities and strategy to make races a little bit different over the course of the year.
Yeah, it seems like the problem I have now is I either need to come up with a strategy to try and get close to Sean, or I need to come up with something to try and beat Ryan and Miguel, because we're all so close on pace. I think today it worked out where I beat Miguel and Ryan because of the strategy a little bit, but then Sean was so far up the road because of the strategy that I was never able to have a shot after the first stint. So it's hard to know. I haven't really done a lot of testing for this week either with changing work schedules, so second is pretty good for the amount of testing time, but it still hurts a little bit.
Congratulations on second, Josh. We'll see you from the Lone Star State over in June to continue this Butt Kicker Sports Car Series.
Thank you, guys.
And from one private label Team Hype driver, we talk with the race-winning private label Team Hype driver who was chatting with Sean Campbell. Phil, how did you feel about this race? I don't necessarily think any of us expected the big one to be that big.
I think I'm still puckered up from the run through the S's Arjuna, to be completely honest with you, because that was very scary.
What did you see? I've got to ask.
To be honest, nothing in specific. It was just kind of a car landmine, and I was praying I picked the right side because I saw a Geo car off to the left. That's like the only thing I did see. And then he started shooting over right as I had already dedicated right, so I was scared. I was about to be turned into a BMW sandwich there between him and the wall, but I think I was the last to squeeze through, and then Adam and Flynn got caught up in it. I'm not sure if Flynn made it through. He might have done, but I know it was chaos behind me.
I think you're going to enjoy going through some of those slow-mos because you, I think, were the only car to really skirt through safely. After that, you and John Bader were back and forth in traffic. Did you ever feel like you were under pressure, or were you able to manage that gap through the traffic?
The first stint, I definitely felt like I had the measure on John. I was just trying to save fuel behind him to go an extra lap in case I didn't get past him. But when I got past him, I just started going as quick as I could. And then second and third stints, when the track rubbered up more, he was definitely probably on my pace. And I'd say he was probably better in traffic because I was maybe being a little bit too cautious because I've crashed out twice now. So honestly, I was more focused on making the end than winning the race.
Well, Phil, I don't know if this is really history. I think it is. You've won this year now in the open wheel, the retro, and now the sports car series. So congratulations. Now let's see which one you'll win, if you can win the title in all 3 of them as well.
Yeah, we'll see. It's definitely not been start I've won in 2 out of 3, so we'll see how it goes.
Just setting the expectations high for Phil Kraus. See if we can chat with Trevor Malone as well, our AM class winner. Trevor, do you have a copy?
Yes, I do.
Well, congratulations first. You survived the race. How difficult was it just to get through in one piece?
I'm dying right now. That's exactly what's going on. So me battling with Chris Reagan, that was such a battle. It was the entire race, and I'm just excited that I even won the AM class. So I'm doing great now.
It did look like a lot of fun, and I do believe this is your first victory in your Lionheart Racing Series career. What does it feel like after being part of this community for so long?
I don't even know, man. I'm so excited. I mean, I've been working hard. I got a new setup, new rig, cockpit, and everything like that, and I felt really comfortable today. So I'm feeling great.
I can hear the smile. Congratulations, Trevor. Go off and enjoy this one, and we'll see you in a month's time to roll on with the series.
Sure thing.
Always great to have a chat with our drivers, and thank you for them to giving us a little bit of their time. But like I mentioned, Andrew, next up we head over to Texas, where everything is bigger, including our runs up the hill into turn number 1. This is a track, though, that, in my opinion, you're either good at driving or you don't like it.
Yeah, and I definitely fall into the latter category on this circuit. This is definitely not my favorite track, but I will say 1 month off will do a lot of these drivers a lot of good here. It'll be enough time that I think a lot of drivers can bury what's happened here at Watkins Glen and then come into Circuit of the Americas with a clean slate. The other thing about Circuit of the Americas, look at that straightaway that you have in front of it. There's a lot of space here for the LMDHs and the GT3s to maybe not have quite as many coming togethers as we saw here today at Watkins Glen.
Or maybe conversely, we've got the S's at the start. More opportunity to be side by side and to make contact. Take a look at your next level racing schedule before we say goodbye as well, because as much as we are very much looking forward to June the 12th, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific when we go racing, Circuit de la Sarthe, that's another big race in June. We're getting closer and closer to the halfway mark of the season, though, at which point, Andrew, we can't be sitting here saying, well, the championship's wide open, it can still go anyway. No, at that point, the form book has started to be filled out. We know what drivers are doing in traffic. The drivers know how they want to race everyone else in the series as well. At that point, we'll get a sense for how this series is starting to shake up in its inaugural campaign.
Yeah, I would say the month of August is going to be huge for these drivers. Monza, Red Bull Ring, Road America, 3 exceptionally fast flowing tracks. And by that point, again, exactly as you say, everyone's going to know what they need to do in order to take home this championship.
Well, before we say goodbye, let's thank all of those that make this possible, starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. Butt kicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine redline. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real race car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slick. You'll get fitted with a racing suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about their thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time interaction between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. And finally, graphics. From simple logos to full branding for your company, virtual designs to liveries raced by Indy 500 champions. Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. GraphicsEsports.com is your place to learn more. And it's not just them, but so many more. To learn more about the partners of the Lionheart Racing Series or the 3 competitions the sanctioning body puts on, head on over to LionheartRacingSeries.com, where you'll find championship standing schedules and so much more. For our team here at RaceSpotTV, though, the action does not finish this week for Lionheart competition. We'll be back on Thursday as the Retro Series rumbles out for their first Triple Crown in Pocono. But the Butt Kicker Sportscar Series is on hiatus until we return from the Lone Star State in a month's time. On behalf for the team at RaceSpotTV, for Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us for Butt Kicker Sportscar Series action. We'll see you next month to rumble it on. What a fascinating race we had here today with major championship implications.